Hi folks, and welcome to this critique of the work that we did from our watercolour lesson, our online watercolour lesson, back on the, I think it was the second week of May 2021. And we're starting this off with Bob's work. The remit for the day, of course, was creating depth. So we were working from a photo of a mountain range, the Coolins up in Scotland, with this lovely loch in front of it. And our remit, if you like, was, as the name suggests, creating depth. So we were looking to show off the different almost sort of sequence of distance. Where we had the immediate foreground, which of course was a vast amount of water, which we cut down a bit, and then we hit our first bit of land back there, which is the shallow sort of sloping ground, tree-lined landscape, with the wonderful backdrop of the Coolin Mountains. And as I say, we're starting with Bob's here, and what I really like with this, Bob, is your attention to the focal point. You know, it's can be quite difficult to make a focal point when you're dealing with landscapes like this, because you know it could have been it's each artist's decision at the end of the day, of course, but you know, it could so easily have been, and we've seen it many times, the focal point could have been played off between the mountain peak up here and the pale sky behind. After all, you know, that was on, if we add our design grid, our composition grid, sorry about the wavy lines here, but you get the idea. That certainly was in a position to make it a focal point, but we wanted to buck the trend on the day, just so we could sort of throw a few other ideas open, and we made it this lovely area down here. So I think you've done a fantastic job of that, actually, Bob. As I say, it wasn't easy to do, but the fact that you've kept this really light with the darker sort of wooded area around this, and again, it is on that spot. It's on a sweet spot of the grid. I think that's been done incredibly well there. Yeah, and the rest is in support. They're great mountains. Sky is a little bit. Might have seen this a couple of times recently, Bob. In that, I think you're still not using perhaps enough water when you're putting your skies in. There's evidence of a lot of dry paint up there in the sky. So my tip to you here is to use lots of water, but use lots of paint. That way you'll avoid the dry brush effect. You know, had that been a bit wetter, I think that would have been a fantastic sky, and it would have complemented the rest of the painting. Overall, it's a great painting. It's really, really good. So yeah, so the sky, maybe the water as well. There's still quite a bit of. There was obviously a lot of water used in the painting of the loch, of the water. But on top of that, then I think we went with too many brush strokes. We just busied that up with some drier brush marks. If you've got a nice area just here where it was dry brush and we had the sparkle of the water, I think if you'd have left it at that, that would have sufficed. But I think we sort of thought we'll put a couple more in places, and those tended to end up like the brush strokes that we've seen in the sky there. So more water, lots of paint when you're painting skies and water like this. But so it's a great painting, Bob. It's a really good painting. And you've ticked the boxes. There's a wonderful sense of depth in this painting. So the objective has certainly been achieved. Okay, moving on. And we have next Christine's. Okay, there's this sort of bluish tint to the painting. Now that could be the paint. It could be a filter that you might have used, or it could simply be the lighting in the space that you've taken the photograph of the painting in. It actually is really, I quite like it actually. So let's have a look at the brushwork before we talk about the depth. I think again, I think the sky here has been done really well. There's just a nice mix of both soft edge and hard edge in the sky. It certainly looks like it's been done mostly with the large brush. The water got a little bit busy, I think. I think there was a timing issue here by where we put dry paint over and then we put some very wet paint over that, and I mean very wet over that, so that the dry paint that went on, and I'm guessing it went this way around, the dry stuff went on first and the wetter application went on afterwards. And what's happened there is when you apply that much wetter paint on top of the dry stuff, it'll do as you see here. It does this. It'll have these sort of blooms, if you like. They're not quite cauliflowers. They're not runbacks. They're sort of blooms where the water is actually and the brush probably has just sort of managed to lift shapes out, and you end up with a bit of a mishmash of stuff that wants to go vertical against the stuff that wants to go horizontal. And there's probably just a little bit too much of that vertical, really wet application. A small amount of that might have been better. And if you want to drag these vertical lines down through your water to get the reflective sort of effects, then you need to use a bit less water in the brush. I mean, just to get that effect. It's just simply been too much water when we've applied the vertical brush strokes on the lake, on the loch. The landscape is great. Whoops, my clumsy hands here. Let's go back. The landscape, I think, is fantastic here. Good shapes, good definite shapes. The mountain range at the back there is perfectly positioned in terms of color temperature. We've used that lovely sort of purpley grey to push that chunk of landscape back into the far distance. It could have greened up, perhaps a little more use of whether you're using tube greens or whether you're using I think that we on the day we had at our disposal, if I remember rightly, some phthalo green, and had that been used perhaps with a little bit of cerulean blue, or even the phthalo green with some raw sienna, would have given us a bit more of a green effect here. So it probably just we need to see that sort of slightly greener look in some territory around here. But shape-wise, very dynamic, very effective. Yeah, very, very good painting. Well done, Chris. Okay. And here we're looking at Claire's. Okay, very different again, very different. So the much more saturated colors in this. There's a lovely sense of aerial perspective here, creating the depth. So I think 10 out of 10 here for creating the depth. The remit of the day was that very thing, and that's been accomplished extremely well here. It's slightly on the tight side, the painting, to the point almost of sort of photorealistic around here, which is fine. I mean, and it's the thing is, it's been done very, very well. So it's just an observation of the style rather than any criticism in that sense. Colours are beautiful, absolutely beautiful. There's a hard line that you might have to watch at the water's edge there. It might have been nicer to have allowed some closer shapes. These shapes at the very bank where my cursor is here. Perhaps I ought to show it off better if I pick up a pencil. If you're placing, you've got these sort of tumbling, whatever they are, hedgerows and perhaps masses of gorse and shrubs like that on the landscape back here. But as they got to the water's edge down here, they really needed to be slightly bigger, a sense of being a little bit bigger than some of the ones behind, and probably of the same depth, as dark depth as these trees over here. So because they'd be closer to us, they'd be darker, a little bit warmer. In fact, you know what you've got over here, I don't mean as big, but what tone-wise and color-wise that you got here would have worked well if we'd have just delineated that, because this is nearer to us than this area here is further away from us from this area here. So you just want, let's get rid of that a minute. I'll try and show you what I mean here. So whereas we've got, you know, this sort of greeny yellow back here, when we got to these areas that I've hit in red, we really needed something like this. See how much darker that is that I'm applying here to what's behind in this area here. Okay, and that would have then given us the sense that this bank, as it is, much closer to us than what's going on further up the slope, up the hillside there. But look at these trees. There's a woodland over here. Absolutely fantastically done. I love the texture for that distance is spot on. Absolutely spot on. Just clean this up. Yeah, and I think the information you've given us at these distances here, I mean, as I said earlier, 10 out of 10 for creating, for achieving the depth, creating the depth. Just be a little bit careful with that water line along there, as I say, and give us a little bit more indication that this area of land is closer to us. Yeah, water's good. Yeah, very, very good, Claire. Okay. And now we have Denise. The first thing that strikes me with Denise's work here is the colour. And if anybody's been to Scotland, which I'm sure a lot of you have, this is the colour of the water in Scotland. It is that sort of icy, it's sort of turquoisey, icy, sort of blue in places. So I think that's, you know, that colour-wise, that's absolutely spot on. I think the dry brush marks that we've put in the water, I'm not sure about those. I think we could have done away with those mostly and just kept a few much darker. If I grab a pen here, if we just kept a few smaller things much closer to us here, like this, that would have worked much better, because that tool I've just done there gives us a sense of things being a bit closer to us. If you go too weak, like the brush strokes we've got down the bottom here in the water, it doesn't say it's close. It's not warm enough and it's not strong enough. So you needn't worry too much about putting them. I think probably I would imagine that the idea was that these here were reflections of the sky, but that needs to be done wet in wet. It's been done wet on dry. So just remember, if you're putting in reflections of the sky from up here, the cloudy sky, then do all of this wet in wet. And when the whole water area here is dry, then put in what I've just put in here, these dark hits. Much darker hits, then that's wet on dry. But we've gone wet on dry when we should have been going wet on wet. So save the wet on dry to this area here, right in front of us, right under our nose. Okay, just be careful with the trees. they perhaps need to just get a color that stands out here. The trees are a little bit identical. Everyone looks like it's been made with the same downward pressure of the brush, the same strength of paint. Yeah, I think it'd be nice just to have broken up some of those. I don't think I can erase these small marks on the screen here, but things like that need to be more broken up. If we take this line here, come here, my pen. If we take this, I'll underline it, this dark line that comes down here, we really need to break into that. In other words, do something like this. Just cut through and break that line so it's not a solid line, because again, like the individual trees, they're all of the same strength. It's one dark strong mix. Works great here, by the way. You've done it beautifully along the nearer bank edge here, and that does work. So therefore, if we think about it, okay, yes, you've got the right strength for this bank as it alongside the water. Then the darks back in the trees up here shouldn't be as dark as those, because we're not creating the depth. We're saying that the trees back here must be as close to us as these marks that you've made on the water side here. So it's all in a flat vertical plane, when in fact the ones that I've dotted in pink are further away and therefore should be slightly lighter, softer in color, tone, value. But you know, it's overall it's a great. I love the way the sunlight hits this area over here. Again, the focal point has been nailed, absolutely nailed beautifully. It's great. Good mountain range at the back there. Very convincing snow slope just in this area here. Yeah, and you know, at the end of the day, ultimately, it's a lovely painting to look at. But just bear in mind consider those things I mentioned about, you know, because we are dealing with creating depth in our paintings. You've got to be so careful with the strength of paint at the different distances. But yeah, well done, Denise. Okay, and we have Gwen. Okay. This too has a bit of a warm tint about it. I'm guessing the photo was taken probably indoors under indoor light, sorry. That's good. Some nice application of a dry brush around these lines with the wetter, larger brushwork over the top. And I think that works well up here too. It's a good line to the back of the mountains here, good profile. Water probably needs to be a little flatter. If you can try and make your brush marks a little more horizontal here, Gwen. But overall, that's a good job. I think there's a good sense of depth here. Again, you just got to be a little bit careful with the definition of shapes. If this nearer little shape here was just a little bit more defined in its edge, or a little more solid, then that would tell us that this area here was a bit closer to us than the rest of the area. And just be a little bit careful up here. We could have perhaps made some slightly lighter areas back there, because I think we've got a different focal point here. I don't so much see a focal point in this area here. I don't sort of see that so much as a focal point, but we have got a lovely focal point up there because of the exchange of tonal value. So yeah, it's a great mountain range back there. Really like that, and I do like this crop of land over here. Yeah, it's very effective. Yeah, well done, Gwen. And John. Okay, very different again. Looks almost sort of classic, like an oil painting, this one. There's some very delicate work back here in the background. So good crop of land. I see the focal point sort of here. So we have I think, you know, we almost have a triangle here of the focal point territory, which does work. You've got to be a little bit careful, I think, with the small brush that's been used in the background. I think within this mountainscape, there's been a lot of it's either the point of a large brush or a lot of perhaps a small brush. If these mountain ranges could be applied with a large flat brush with one or two strokes, that will be it will sort of make the painting slightly more impressionistic, if you like. But you know, in terms of information and how we've distributed the information throughout, I do like this territory here. That's a good working area here. We probably needed a little bit more information, you know, in some of these areas back here. Get a slightly darker color to show you what I mean. We needed a bit more information to tell us that there's another distance here to us, and that would have set up another depth, another dimension, if you like, in the landscape. So we have a immediate foreground on the water. We needed a little bit of dark dotted around here, but I think from there back, I think it works really well. I think your colors and tonal values here in the midground, what we can call a midground, are absolutely spot on. And the tonal values and colors in the mountain are absolutely spot on also. But I think a larger flat brush with fewer brush strokes might have just pushed that mountainscape a bit further back again. But again, it's good painting. It's the end of the day, it's a lovely painting to look at, and that's the most important thing. So yeah, excellent. Okay, Lindsay. Okay, nice bright looking painting. Again, I'm sort of seeing some similar things here. The mountain's great. The mountain's absolutely fantastic. I think we need to be a little bit careful with the fact that these trees, all the sort of things growing, if you like, vertical off the ground, almost as though we're trying to say that they're all at the same distance away from us when they're not. Anything round here will be slightly closer to us than what's back there on that line there. So those had to be a little bit weaker, or these had to be stronger. The ones on this bank here had to be a bit stronger. And this area in general, I think, needs warming up. So if I take a nice warm color, say something like this, if you could imagine some warmth in here, like that, look at how that lifts that, just how it lifts the entire painting. So you've got to be mindful that you know, if you go sort of 99% cool, you end up surprisingly enough with a cool looking painting. You could go the other way, of course, and make everything, or 99% of everything, to a warm. It's a nice balance to have something like 70% cool and 30% warm, or vice versa. 70% warm and 30% cool. But you do sort of, I think mostly we do need something to oppose the dominant. So just bear that in mind, Lindsay. Just clear this up a little bit. As I say, the strength of those, it's subtle, and it's a seemingly small issue, but it makes a difference. The strength of the objects here closer to us should be stronger than those that make the ridgeline back there. But the water's good. Yeah, there's some good sort of sparkle effect from the dry brush technique here. And I think you've caught the sky reflections with these slightly warmer ultramarine blue mixes here, just about right. I think the paper was still damp enough for those to look quite soft. A great mountain range, fantastic mountain range. Yeah, good. Okay, well done, Lindsay. And Liz. Okay, I think the first thing I probably need to say is we may have just too much definition. Just a little bit too much definition. Had the mountain range all been within the one envelope, one sort of outer contour line like this, and this had been not quite so detailed, I think we'd have had a better sense of distance on those mountains back there. But this middle ground is fantastic. We have got a lot of dark around here, but then I think because the landmass between the darks upon the ridge and the darks at the water's edge, I think because this area here, because this area here is quite dark in itself, I don't think it looks quite so stark, the fact that the trees at the back here are dark, as dark as the shapes that are on the water's edge here. So I think that makes a difference because it works in this painting. The backline trees there don't look so sort of wrongly placed. You could probably do with a bit more warmth again in this painting. So, the use of something like a burnt sienna in one or two of these places here, just to add a tad of warmth in places. Just lift the whole painting up, and maybe through and just be a little bit careful through that reflection there. That reflection is a little bit solid. Just show you where I mean. So we could just break that vertical up a little bit. It's a little bit solid there, that vertical. Yeah, these vertical downstrokes that we use for reflections, you've got to be really quite careful with them. There's a hard line just there, and if this was a reflection of something very close to us, imagine that we were just on one side of a canal, and a canal is only 10 feet, 12 feet wide. We'd be very close to the water, we'd be very close to what was on the opposite side of that canal, then we might find a hard edge like this. But when the distance is this great, this from here to here, you shouldn't really get too much hard line in the edges of your reflections. Just be a little bit careful with that, Liz. So yeah, but I love that area there. We have our little house over here. Yeah, that mid-ground it does work wonderfully well. Okay, Shirley. Okay, we have a good line, good shapes in this. Let's have a look. Let's just grab a pencil a minute, and yeah, very good shapes. I love what's happening down here on this area. Scale looks good. The depth looks good. The only issue I think I've got with the depth is possibly the saturation of this dark red brown. up here. Now it sort of brings things forward. It's such a warm dark that it doesn't really push back enough. And I have to say, in your defence here, Shirley, I am always sort of saying wherever you're using a cool color, you should use a warm color and vice versa. But you've got to also bear in mind the strength, the tonal strength. So if maybe this dark brown that's here was a lot lighter, and we'd perhaps continued, we've got a light area here and here in the mountainscape. If maybe that crept more up into towards the ridge line up here, that would have kept the mountainscape looking a bit further away from us. Dark colors dark tones bring things forward, and warm colors bring things forward, of course, as we know. But if you use both of those elements too far away, then it can look sometimes a little bit little out of balance. I think what you need to do is you either take a sponge to lighten this up here, or you make something in the foreground here even warmer, because the warmest colors are really the furthest ones away. There is some warmth here. I'll show you. There's some warmth here, of course, in this little outcrop of land, but it's outwarmed, it's outshone by the depth of warmth in the furthest place from us. So and in nature, and I've probably got photos in my photo library where you'll see something like this. But as artists, for us, sometimes we have to. There are rules we can break and rules we can't break. So you have to sort of bear that in mind a little bit. If I think what we need to do to compensate here is to really warm up something much closer to us. So if we were to take something, like this and warm this up even further, even get a reflection down here, then that mountain looks cooler. It looks further away from us. But great shapes. Love the landscape. I love the outline. Love the design. Composition wise, absolutely spot on there. Good. Yeah, excellent, Shirley. And moving on to Suzanne. And again, we have a really stormy sky. I remember on the day we were creating these sort of overhead clouds to help convey the depth, because skies can be used to do that, of course. You may just want to warm that light patch up there, Suzanne, this one here. I don't know whether you can see this from my cursor. Let's grab a colored pencil. Yeah, you may just want to sort of warm up that cloud up there a little bit. And then that cloud color, if you did use something like a warm pink like I've used here, you can imagine that bursting on and catching the flats, the uplands of the landscape down here in places like that. Great backdrop there to the Kulin Mountains. There's light patches, and I think, yeah, the warmth has been retained for this closer area of the mountain range back there. So that works fine, because mostly that top ridge up there is of a cool bluey purple, so that pushes the mountain range back. And so that conveys well. This is great. This is the texture that you've got in this chunk of land here. I like that. Really like that. Just in this area here. That's fantastic. Yeah. It looks like you had good fun creating parts of this. And the lay of the land here I think is good. We could be a little less fussy, I think, perhaps on this ridge line here. Let me just show you. I think maybe, you know, we needed to, if you look at the tonal value between what's behind here, you know, in this, in the mountain behind here, if you look at the tonal value there, I think the tonal value of what's going on in front is a little too close. So you wanted to sort of keep quite a bit of light at the top of this, and then, you know, you dot it with the darks. You dot it with the dark trees along the ridge like that. But then as you come further down here, of course, things get a little bit darker like that, you know, so the tonal value of something like this, until of course you get back to the water's edge again down here, and you can go nice and dark and bold again. So a couple of things delineating the edge of this, the bank line there. But no, I mean that's a well painted painting. Yeah, I suppose what it is, it might just be a tad too busy overall. You know, it might have been nice to have kept this stretch of this slither, this long triangular sort of slither of land a lot more simplified. I think that would make a difference, actually. It would tie in with what's going on the right hand side of your valley, just here in the mid ground. Yeah, just simplify that area there. I think that would certainly make big difference. You could still do that with a synthetic nylon brush and a bit of water. Just scrub it through, and when you've scrubbed out and simplified it, just warm it up a little bit. You could even use the same colours you've used over here, which you've got some very natural looking greens over here, and run that almost a single brush stroke through that slither of land there. And when that's dry, then you go back in and re-establish just the odd couple of things at the edge of the water, and a slightly less or a slightly easier to read ridge in terms of what's on that ridge back there. Very good. It's been a really good body of work submitted for this critique. So yeah, well done everybody, and hope that helps. Hope that's something for you to sort of consider, and we'll see you at the next one.